Good evening. Thank you for coming to our Candidate Forum, which is co-sponsored by the Sheboygan Branch of the American Association of University Women, or AAUW, and also the Sheboygan Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Initiative, or SDEIB. The mission of AAUW is to empower and advance equity for women and girls through advocacy, research, and education. While our organization is nonpartisan, we do take positions on education and women's issues. Our branch also sponsors a $2,500 scholarship for non-traditional aged women who have returned to college.
The Sheboygan Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Initiative was formed in 2019 and is a diverse group of community activists committed to an equitable and inclusive Sheboygan. The Education Committee is working to address inequities in school districts and educational systems throughout Sheboygan County. I'm happy to introduce Mary Jo McBrearty from AAUW, who will serve as a moderator with me this evening. Marianne Comstock will serve as our timekeeper.
Thank you. Thank you to our candidates for being here this evening, and thanks for those of you who are tuning in. I want to let you know, as far as format is concerned, there are going to be 7 separate questions, and I will ask the first 4, and then Julie's going to do the last ones. We're going to answer them in alphabetical order. So for the first question, Ryan Berg is going to go first, and we'll go down the line. For the second question, Katie will go first, and we'll move down the line so everybody gets at least one chance to go first. And then if we get as far as the 7th question, Ryan, then it would be back to you. And the first question is probably the most significant for you because it's how you're going to introduce yourself. So for this first question, you're allowed 3 minutes to respond. And in the following questions, it's going to be 2 minutes each. Okay? Clear? Thank you very much. Okay, question number 1. What are your primary qualifications to be a school board member? And what is the one best thing that you will bring to the district board? Ryan.
First off, thank you, Mary Jo, for being moderator this evening, and also to the AAUW and the Sheboygan DEIB for putting this on. What are my qualifications? First off, I'm a parent. That is something that is very important to me. While my kids have just recently graduated, my son graduated this past summer from A2, and my other child has graduated from North. I do have connections to this district as a parent, and I remember what it's like to have the fundraisers and going to all the concerts and everything else. As far as a professional experience, I have a degree in organizational administration from UW-Oshkosh. That is a degree that I got online. I got when I was 45 years old. And so I know a little bit, granted as an adult, but I know a little bit about what it's like to have virtual learning. And that is something that I know will likely be discussed a little bit later on tonight. As far as other things that I bring to the board, what I bring, I think the key thing that I bring is I bring an ability to listen. I may not agree with everyone here tonight. In fact, I probably won't. But I really try as best as I can to hear what people have to say. Even if we don't agree about it, it's still really important, to listen. And there are times too when enough evidence is provided that that we can change our mind and we can work together. I think that to me is a key thing for being a board member, is the idea to be a good listener. In some cases, be flexible, and in other cases, where if you are firm in your beliefs, you can explain, this is what's going on, this is where I'm at, and if you disagree, that's okay. That's all right, and we move on from there. So other things that I think that I bring to the table is, first off, with being on the board for 9 years, I have a pretty good idea as far as how the district runs and how it doesn't run. Well, certainly with what happened with COVID has been a huge earthquake worldwide, but especially in the United States and especially here in Wisconsin. I think because of the experience that I've had, knowing how things have been, that also gives me the background to come up with some ideas, which hopefully we'll be able to discuss a little bit later on, as far as how we can fix it and make things that much better. Thank you.
All right, my name is Katie Czecholinsky. I recently moved to the Sheboygan area with my husband about 9 years ago, and we simply fell in love with the community. We have 2 children, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and being someone who was born and raised on a dairy farm, I definitely am no stranger to hard work, and I actually got my master's while working full-time and having both my children, which is no easy feat. So I do value just the importance that education can have in playing a role of just advancing kids and giving them that opportunity to better themselves in their future life. So as far as my career goes, I am a supply planner in logistics, and some of my kind of big responsibilities are identifying trends, assembling plans, and really maximizing opportunities where available, and that's what I would bring to the board. And as well as putting together those certain types of plans, a lot of times I have to make those decisions with very limited information. And it is important for a leader to make those hard decisions based on limited information and being able to course correct when needed. But a decision has to be made, and that's what I would really bring to the table in regards to that. Like I had stated earlier, I earned my master's from Lakeland University. I also received my bachelor's in business administration and international business from UW-Whitewater. And I really do know the stress that everyone's kind of gone through this year and trying to balance work, school, and trying to make the best of a bad situation. But at the end of the day, it is really important that in order for the kids to have the best shot in life is to be in school in person for both not only the students, but the teachers too. So, thank you.
Hello, I'm Krista Migalski. I think the qualifications that I bring are similar to many of the others here. So I'm a parent, I have 5 children. 4 of them have gone through the school district here. The youngest one is a junior at North right now. I've also served as a volunteer, and I think that really plays into it. So I volunteered as a mentor through Big Brothers and Big Sisters, both as a lunch buddy and as a big brother. And I've also volunteered as a coach in the community. I have a broad board experience serving as the chairperson of the Law Enforcement Standards Board for the state. Been on the board for the last 8 years and have been the chairperson for the last 6 years. I also have board experience with nonprofits in the community and currently serve on the board of Samaritan's Hand and Sheboygan County Halfway House. And I mentioned some of those things because I think it goes along with my public leadership and experience as a department head in the city, in that similar to that is that as board members, one of the things that we're tasked with is really not only setting the direction of the district, but working with sometimes very limited resources. And so being strategic and understanding what we can fund now and how to plan strategically to be able to fund other things later, and helping to put together those plans. I think my experience as a community leader has demonstrated that I understand that in a big system, we don't work alone. We really need to be collaborative and form partnerships, and I think that's very, very important. And then lastly, I think, the best qualification that I really bring is that I'm an introvert, and so I tend to be a pretty good listener too. I don't have to be talking all the time, but I'm open to hearing other viewpoints and using that really to develop my viewpoint and work together with others really to get to the best place. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I want to reiterate the thanks that others have given to the people of the AAUW, the Sheboygan DEIB Initiative, and then to my fellow candidates who are up here with me today. Like everybody else up here, I am a parent of 4 children, all of which have at some point or another attended SASD schools. 3 of them, when it's all said and done, will have graduated from the SASD. The youngest will be a freshman at Etude High School this fall. And then I've got a graduating senior this year from Warner High School. His slightly older brother graduated a year ago from Etude High School. And then their much older sister, who now has become really my sister, because I don't look old enough to be a father of a 30-year-old. I'm sure you agree. She went to Jackson Elementary way back when. I've always, ever since we moved to Sheboygan back in 2008, I've been part of supporting teachers, staff, and administrators in helping students and families acquire knowledge and learn and grow. Initially at the Jackson site-based team, followed by a stint in the A² Charter School Board, and then followed by the Warner School Board. Based on that experience, some folk asked me to throw my hat in to fill in a seat at the Sheboygan Area School District Board. And I just finished, I'm currently finishing out that special term and asking for your help getting reelected. I am a UW-Madison grad. I studied astronautical engineering with the desire to become an astronaut. So I joined the US Navy and flew helicopters for them for a while. Unfortunately, there are no helicopter flying astronauts in the astronaut corps. So I then got my my master's degree in international management. I worked in a number of organizations, international development, especially, but focused on finance, banking, and entrepreneurial development. I am currently on the Meade Public Library Board. I sit on the Goodside Grocery Board, shop local, shop Goodside first. And my day job is at the ACLU of Wisconsin. The number one thing I bring to the school district is centering the voices and lived experiences of people and communities traditionally marginalized and underserved. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Santino Laster. I would like to echo the sentiments of the thank you and the gratitudes for this platform to share our opinions, our viewpoints for the Sheboygan Area School District. So my primary qualifications is I've worked on the front lines of education. I worked at the Milwaukee Academy of Science, where I was the Dean of Students. I transitioned into the security and also worked as the bus coordinator and also taught social studies. It was a great opportunity to be in the schools and work on the front lines with underprivileged children in the inner city of Milwaukee. You see a lot of diverse situations, traumas that they go through, that it's just not one set of things that you deal with. It's a multitude of behaviors or things that they're dealing with at home that come to school, and you have to wear many, many hats. So I did a great job, I think, in that capacity. I will backtrack and say that I'm a father of 3 sons. Again, my sons are currently in the district. The youngest 2, 8 and 10, go to Lake Country Academy. My oldest son graduated from Sheboygan South. I worked closely with families to create plans for students' futures. When I was at the Milwaukee Academy of Science, I coached at Sheboygan South for football. I also mentored at-risk youth for Sheboygan County. That gave me great gratitude and the privilege to be able to give back to those that didn't have someone to give back to them. I'm also part of the Black American Community Outreach. These are all city groups. I'm also part of the Diversity, Equity, and Belonging Group, also part of the Sheboygan Equity and Justice Committee, where we all are focusing on the city issues that we have currently. I have just been appointed to the DLAND receiving home as a board member. I just got voted in today, so I'm very, very excited about the new adventure that I'm having. One best thing that I can bring to the board, I'm gonna try to make this quick, that I have a servant's heart. My passion is to serve and to give back. Being able to have an open mind, not being one-minded. I'm a great listener. I have a voice for the ones that's in the back of the room. So those that aren't being heard, the underprivileged, those are out there that feel that they're not being a part of the group as a collective, not having enough equity or inclusion. That's who I want to represent as well. Not just the forefront of the main populace, but also those that are feeling underprivileged or not being heard. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Versi. I've grown up in Sheboygan. A couple of years I lived out of state. I've raised my family here. I have 5 children. I have 3 girls, 2 boys. Currently I have a 6-year-old at Lake Country Academy, and I have a freshman and sophomore at North High School. I am a critical care paramedic for Orange Cross Ambulance in Sheboygan. I've been serving the community of Sheboygan for the last 22 years. I have a passion for helping people. I'm also an adjunct instructor for the emergency medical services at LTC. I've been doing that for the last 17 years. So I'm a part-time educator. In my free time, I went back to school and got a degree in nutrition, kind of for my own health problems. I am a 2-time breast cancer survivor, so I do understand struggles, dealing with family, dealing with health issues, in my job, dealing with things that happened in the world with COVID, things like that. I'm a good problem solver. I think I bring to the table a little bit of a different perspective. I'm a good listener. I have a passion for helping people. They very easily come to me to talk to me. So I guess that's a good thing, that people like to share their life stories with me. My children have struggled through some of this with the COVID, with the virtual learning, which is kind of what brought me to want to put myself out there and see what I can do to help make a difference. I enjoy working together with other people. I like other people's perspectives. I like to listen to people. I like to hear stories. I like to hear their life. And I really hope I get that chance to help. Thank you.
Thank you all. Question number 2, and this one we'll start with Katie and then move down the line. Describe your views on district approaches to school discipline. For example, classroom or school codes of conduct, bullying policies, suspension, expulsions, that kind of thing, school discipline. Okay, Katie?
I think what's important when deciding certain plans in order to handle students who are going through a tough situation, especially today, is to make sure that we gather kind of all the information regarding that specific information and evaluate based on multiple different sources of information. So that way it's never always one-sided. And it is never a easy decision to be made or to have or to make that decision. Decisions do need to be made, and I would support kind of the current practices that are in place at the district right now. And it would be very important to also consider the amount of input from not only the teachers, but other experts, social workers, that sort of thing. So that way the student can get the help that they need in order to be successful, because every person is worth kind of fighting for in that stance.
So my view on school discipline would be that clearly the school district has to have a strong discipline policy that's well laid out so that it can be consistent and that those that are administering it can all be on the same page. We can't have one thing happening in one place and something else happening somewhere else. So it needs to be consistent. I think it has to be individualized at the same time. And so when we make decisions about what discipline is, the individual circumstances that are involved are very important, and the underlying issues going on with that are also important. So could there be a mental health issue or a struggle at home or something else that's contributing to that? So I think it's really important that we identify those other factors when we're deciding which way to go with discipline. I would say at the same time, discipline is important in that we have to have order in our schools for the good of everybody. So we can't allow some students to disrupt the learning opportunities for others. And so in that way, we have to make sure that we've created enough different programs so that we can provide the same opportunities to everybody. I think for the most part, the school district has done a very good a job of doing those things. And then I think working with partners is very important. So Health and Human Services really has to be involved to make sure that we're coordinating services and that we're getting outside of those silos. The police department has to be involved in that. Programs that are in place like Handle with Care, where when a child is involved in a traumatic situation and the police are aware of it, they're notifying the school district so that they can notify teachers so that they can deal with the issue the next day.
Thank you for that question. I think in all of this, we have to focus and honor, focus our efforts and honor the agency of the people involved. The parties that have to enforce codes of behavior and the parties involved in either harming or being harmed. I'd like to believe that the idea that the district has to incorporate restorative practices into its policies are well guided because the interventions are harm and trauma informed. They take into account the place where both the aggressor and the aggrieved are at the moment. They center the outcomes on restoring the dignity of the affected, but they also include specifically ways of reintegrating an aggressor into the community. And I think it's really important that we continually strive to bring people back into our community and aim to build a beloved community in the sense that Dr. Martin Luther King and then later Bell Hooks named a beloved community. Thank you.
Thank you. So the views and approaches on school discipline, this is pretty much up my alley. As the Dean of Students, I dealt with the discipline within the school for middle school and high school at Milwaukee Academy of Science. There has to be restorative justice practices, as Marcos just stated. But with that comes, it has to have equity. It has to have inclusion. The way I set it up was that we set up a discipline platform or levels to the process, and we allow the students to have a say in it, so that they have equal buy-in and that we can hold them accountable when they don't reach those goals. Each issue should be addressed the same way. I mean, one person shouldn't be disciplined one way and the other is being disciplined a little bit more harsh. There has to be some equity in how we are disciplining our children. I believe, I talked with some of the teachers, they do have the PBIS, which is a positive behavior interventions and support. That was part of our school. That is huge. When we're trying to support the behaviors, even though it's negative, we also need to give some positive feedback and encourage them to continue to be great students that they are. We need to know the students. Don't just discipline the student. You need to know who that student is, As Chief Domagowski said, the traumas, we have to understand what they're going through, what they've been through, because they bring all of those things to the classroom and to the building, and we need to learn how to address those and separate those. Address the issue and the problem. We have to have a due process. It has to be fair and consistent. And that goes from top to bottom. You can't have any, obviously with younger children, you have to treat them a little bit more delicately, but there should be a platform that reaches the same exact outcome that we want each and every time. Thank you.
My views on school discipline, addressing what you had said about bullying policies. I don't believe bullying should be acceptable in any school in any way, shape, or form. Starting at the younger grades and moving up, having these policies in place that the kids understand what the rules are and what they are to follow, having that foundation is going to carry them through all the way through high school. There needs to be consistency. There needs to be accountability. Once you get into high school, these children, including my own children, they understand the consequences. And there is a point where you have to let them have the consequences for their actions. So consistency with that, policies in place. When you talk about traumas, the individual child, the students, things that, that happen in the home that they bring into the classroom, if there's any disruptions, things like that, you have to look at that individual child and what they're going through and having that safe space where they would be able to discuss what's going on so that they would be able to be helped. But having those policies consistent with everyone. I believe strongly that the officers in school, they do help with that. They do have training in a lot of aspects of that, and like Chief Domagowski said, that they know of things that they can bring to the school, that they can notify the teachers that there are students that are having issues or problems, so that everybody's notified ahead of time. So looking at the kids as individuals and listening to them and hearing them and being consistent is where I stand with that.
For the question. I think it is a critical issue that we're facing today. One of the unfortunate things about being last when you're speaking on a topic like this is I agree with most of you. I think that is something that that is one thing that the district does pretty well. And at least take off my mask. I apologize. Usually the mask is, I'm loud enough that people can hear me even with the mask on. But let's start all over again. One of the things that I think the district does very well is trying to be as equitable as possible, given that we're in a very early stage of establishing equity in our district. As a board member, I can tell you, I can't tell you how many times that when I was early in my career as a board member, we had several expulsion hearings every year, and that was probably the hardest meeting we'd have. I cried more than once after we made our decision, because you just ache for that child, for that family, for the system. And I am pleased that the district is taking steps to start avoiding the expulsion unless you absolutely have to. I mean, unless if it's an absolute danger to the community, that they have processes that they're starting to put in place to help that. One concern that I do have is that when you look at the numbers, and I know I got 15 seconds, so I'll be quick. When you look at the numbers, there are a higher number of students of color on a per capita basis that have disciplinary issues compared to other students. That is a concern. I don't have an answer for that yet, because I think we need to do more study, more research. I don't think it's a thing of racism. I hope not, but it is something that we do need to really take a look at going forward.
Thank you again. Question number 3. And for this one, we're going to start with Christopher. What kind of training should teachers, staff, and administration receive to ensure that all students are treated equally and that all interactions are appropriate with all students?
So I think to start out with, this could go in a lot of different directions. And I think that really the administration has to figure out, along with the board, what is really needed at each level and what is the best way to essentially either add to what's already being presented or what would be given to them in the future. So I think there's lots of different training that they could benefit from. Some of it's already been mentioned, but training in bias and how to identify bias and what unconscious bias is so that you have some understanding of that and can identify it when you see it. I think a lot of the training that the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging group is looking into and deciding. So I think a lot of that is really relevant. And it's really a matter of which comes first or which is more effective at what level. I think trying to integrate that into some of the updates that they get in teaching methods is important. And then I also think additional training on really what our community looks like now. What is our who makes up our community, both from an ethnic standpoint, a race standpoint, an economic standpoint, so that they can really understand what is going on in the community. For my job, I get a very unique picture of the community, and I think that the same could be said for most of the other board members. So we all have different experiences. And so getting information on what other people's experiences are could really help develop that.
Thank you for this question. Let's be honest, if I had an answer to this, I'd have shared it with the board 2 years ago. And let's also acknowledge that there isn't a school district in Wisconsin that has gotten this right yet. So there isn't a model to follow. We're all trying to figure it out as we go. I think some of the things that we need to keep front and center as we figure this out together is that, one, we need to, and I'm going to start to sound like a broken record, honor the agency of the teachers, staff, and administrators, but more importantly, the students, as we craft what the school district needs to break the racialized outcomes that we see, racial and other identity outcomes that we see. We need to receive training in how trauma and harm show up in our classrooms and how to mitigate those. And we need to learn how to make, how to incorporate culturally appropriate approaches into our classroom. But again, I want to make sure to finish with focusing and centering the agency of the people involved. Because at the end of the day, the board can promulgate this or that policy, but if we don't have the buy-in of the teachers and the interest of the students and the input of the students, the policy won't be very effective. Thank you.
Just to follow up, Marcos hit it on the head. I don't know if there is anything out there right now that we can do, but there is a lot of training and opportunities to grow as long as we can acknowledge that there is growth. That's how we will and continue to grow. But just some of the things that I've had in my career, I'm working in education and other facets of my professional life, trauma-informed care. We have to understand what these traumas are. We have to understand what the issues are. If you don't know where the child has been or the families have been, how can you help them? And you need to meet them where they're at, they don't need to come where you are. You need to go where they are so that you can understand. A lot of the times, it's an educational gap. The literacy, some of them are not as educated as we think they are, so that's a barrier. They think that you're talking over them and demeaning them. So that's how we need to reach our children. For teachers, we need to have those crucial conversations. There's courses that's out there for crucial conversations. That's a course so that we are able to handle a situation without emotion, but result-driven. The DEI, there needs to be some diversity, equity training in our schools. That's key. That needs to be first and foremost as well. Cultural sensitivity courses as well. That will be huge for our teachers and our students to grow together. And then going to other districts in Wisconsin, if we can, or even out of the state, send teachers to go see how they're doing their classrooms with certain behaviors. We did it at our school down in Milwaukee, and that showed great promise and progress with dealing with different behaviors. Because each platform is different, each demographic is different, but the behaviors and some of the issues are kind of the same and unique. So that's another thing that we could do. Thank you.
In the aspect of training for teachers, I agree with what everybody else has said. There are so many different avenues that we can go down with this. My career as a paramedic, I deal with all of this, pretty much every aspect. And going into people's homes, it is a completely different world. And you see people where they're at. So it's a perspective that is, I think I'm blessed for being able to see it and be able to help people. Trainings that teachers could use is obviously, the equality. We don't want to have any racism in schools, everybody treated equally. Trauma, being able to see and recognize abuse, neglect. There's a lot of, cues that teachers will be able to pick up on with training. Autism training, with the sensitivity, things like that. Mental health behaviors. I mean, you learn to watch people and see them and listen to them and watch them. You can tell a lot about somebody. Teachers would be able to help children in a lot of ways because sometimes that's their safe space when they go to school. Being able to listen and hear them, like I said, about the abuse, neglect, if children are eating or, things are going on at home. Signs of alcohol use and drug use. Being a parent in this day and age, it's out there, and there are children that bring it into school. So being able to recognize those things and having training on that, I think, could be never, ongoing. It's never ending. You'd be able to do stuff all the time. So.
Thank you for that question. I think one of the key things that people need to do, whether you're a teacher or a board member or a parent, or whomever, is when you are trying to assess and trying to figure out what's going on, especially when it comes to diversity and when it comes to equity, is sometimes you need to shut up and listen. It is more than, I know Marcus used the word agency. I'm not as fancy as Marcos is, but really that's one of the key things that we need to do a better job in this district and really community-wide. When I grew up in Sheboygan, I went to Grant Elementary School. We had one Latinx family. We had no black families. We had an Arabic family. And the Hmong population was just starting to come into Sheboygan. Now we are at 49% students of color. And unfortunately, we're at a situation, where the community, it's taken some time for the community to adjust to that. And I think one of the things we can do is be a model for the community as a whole and say that we're going to provide consistent, equitable, fair discipline and also understanding the stories of those students that we have. Trauma-informed care is been a buzzword lately, but it's important. I would encourage, actually, if possible, to have students take as part of their if they are having issues, have them take an ACEs test to find out where are they at on the trauma scale, and because that will inform a lot as far as what teachers can do, what staff can do, to help that child grow and overcome the issues that they've had as a child, and they will be able to adjust better as an adult. And with that, I'll pass.
I think pretty much what's been kind of echoed up here is the need for kind of professional and organizational development is key in order to addressing these issues. No different than what I personally have to go through in the private industry. I actually just went through Crucial Conversations training. And just being able to reevaluate whether or not these, training opportunities, are they needed? Do we need to expand on them? And doing this on a regular schedule so that way we are being more abreast to kind of what's going on in the community and the country as a whole. And believe we also need to have proper policies and procedures in place so that way every student is treated equally. And this is being driven by direction from the administration and board, so they need to do their due diligence to make sure they're reevaluating and setting the correct policies for the school district. And then too, if we need be, we need to find additional resources, because I do believe we need to allow teachers to teach, because that's what they went to school for. And a lot's been put on the teachers' shoulders, and we need to make sure that if this is something that needs to lie in a different area, that we get the resources needed to put it underneath the experts that are are able to handle it. Thank you.
Question number 4. How will you work to increase parental engagement and involvement in the school district? And we're going to start with Marcos.
Thank you for that question. Once again, if I had the answer to that, I would have shared it a long time ago. Every single governing board, site-based team that I've been part of has struggled with this. The parent-teacher organizations at every site struggle with this. So I don't know that there is a pat answer. I don't know that I can give anything but encouragement of the moment we find ourselves in now, right? We're emerging from a global and national catastrophe. Parents and students are engaged in education in a way they haven't been for many years prior. And this is the moment to kind of catch everybody before they recede back into their homes. Engaging teachers, students, and their families in this conversation of what education looks like. We broke some things as we retreated to our homes to try to stay safe from the pandemic. And now as we put them back together is an opportunity to take what has worked well in our outreach to families and other stakeholders and incorporate that into our return to normal, such that normal is not just back to how it was a year ago, but normal is better and more accessible education for everybody in Sheboygan. Thank you.
This is a tough question. With the families, the demographics of the city being factory work, shifts vary, involvement will be hard sometimes, but it needs to start with building relationships with parents and their children when they first begin their educational journey in the SASD. Parents need to be encouraged to share their own ideas. This is involving parents with different opportunities of being chaperones or coming in and doing lunch dates. I've done it at our school where I help the teachers with projects or such things of that nature. I mean, there's meetings, there's concerts, sport events, There's a lot of things that can be done where parent involvement can be more instrumental. There's various job shifts of parents making it challenging for parents to attend certain events. So being able to meet them where they're at right now, obviously with the COVID, with the Zoom, having open Zoom meetings where they can come in and chime in when they can would be great. I just think that we can explore some virtual ways for parents to be involved with the unique opportunities to celebrate their children. Obviously, if they can't make it, some parents might not think they're presentable, so they don't want to come in. There's a lot of different variants that deals with families' backgrounds that stop them from coming into the schools. We need to break those barriers and help them and reach them where they're at versus always trying to get them to come into the building. So I really do believe that the Zoom calls, the Zoom meetings would be beneficial at first until we can start building those relationships and getting them into the school. Playgrounds, they can come out on the days that they have recess and come out and have fun. But whatever it can be, just a phone call sometimes can get the parent involved and they can do things behind the scenes. So we can just start with the simples. Thank you.
This is a difficult question. Looking at my own personal life and how crazy busy it can be, adding more hours to my day and my life it's a lot. But my children have been attending Lake Country Academy for, gosh, when did we start there? Early 2000s, when it was still a private school. And they had volunteer hours, you know, and they wanted each family to put in 40 hours a school year. And it was kind of a goal to look forward to, you know, like, you know, you put your time in, you filled it out for the families, and there were actually like benefits at the end of the year, you know, if you met those goals. And it did get you involved, and it kind of made you want to participate in more things than you probably would have. You know, two-parent working families, like myself as a single parent, you know, it's hard, but there are places that you can squeeze in and get involved in the schools. Different avenues of getting a hold of families. Not everybody wants a text message. Not everybody wants an email, you know, and then sending something mail and, like Santo said, like a phone call. You know, sometimes like, hey, you know what, I know your background. Would you be interested in helping us out with this? A little bit more personal. I think that would be a good approach. And looking at other schools, you know, Lake Country does it their way. You know, North has their organizations and they're volunteering that way. And look at other districts and other places around Wisconsin and get some ideas, get people involved.
Learning how to get involved as a parent sometimes is very difficult. You know, if you come from a history where parents are not active, you know, in your education, that can make, you know, that it does tend to feed on, you know, generation after generation. I think, you know, one of the things that Santino had said is we got to start early. You know, not even at kindergarten, but we got to start at the ELC, you know, or if you have a child that is special needs, you know, working with the Birth to 3 program, and ask the question, you know, of every parent, what do you need in order for you to be able to help? Because every parent, every family has a unique situation, and some of them have significant barriers to being able to participate. You know, it may be because they are a single parent, or they may be working 2 or 3 jobs. There may be a transportation issue. There may be a medical issue. One of the things that I really would like to, as we go through our equity discussion, is really focus on the idea of a community school. You know, where it is kind of like a site-based team, but it's plussed up. You know, where parents are all on the site-based team. Every parent is, and they ask, you know, and they say, hey, I need help with this. I need help with medical care. Now, the SASD is working with a number of different agencies and helping provide medical care, you know, for one of our schools at Longfellow. That was a need that was determined, and it's happening. We need additional help with childcare and with education, for before and after school. So we're working with the Boys and Girls Club. Those were needs that were expressed by our parents. And I think that's one way, by being able to assess what those needs are for the families, that'll make it a lot easier for those families to get involved.
Well, this is a really great question. I can say I am the result of a parent trying to get engaged with the community and build those ties, as evident being here today. And I think this ties into one of the core tenets on why I'm running is to improve the accountability, take a look at the budget, and really improve communication, both internal and external in the community. With improving the communication in the community, COVID has done a real disservice, and the relationships between the parents and the schools and the community have been broken, and we need to rebuild that and focus on that. Some of the ideas I would have that I'd bring to the table is monthly year-round town halls to involve different local community groups, to have that outreach on what each of the individual schools are doing. Sheridan Elementary does a great job of updating their Facebook pages on information that's out there. And even just allowing a great teacher or staff who's really energetic to go out in the community and spread the word on new programming and initiatives that are happening. Kind of as Ryan stated, it's really hard to find out where you can, basically as a parent who wants to be involved and wants to take an active role in the school, it's hard to find that information. So let's make it easier for people to be able to access that, improve a way to view the board meeting notes, or just have a lot of that information readily accessible on the website and not have people hunt and peck for it. So those are just some of the ideas. And a big thing I really enjoy about Lake Country Academy too is setting that expectations that parents need to volunteer 2 days out of the year. Because not only it will kind of improve the parent engagement, but build that relationship with the teacher, so that way the child's educational experience is more of a holistic approach. And yeah, there's a lot of ideas, but at the end of the day, we really got to improve our communication with the external community, including the students and the parents. Thank you.
So I agree that this is really a great question. Schools are really neighborhoods' strongest assets, and they're one of our key building blocks of our community. Because of how things have changed technology-wise and the speed that society moves and the mobility that everybody has in the society, we've lost some of that sense of community. And so I think schools are really part of the key piece to help bring that together. Tied into that is the struggle that many teachers have because they don't have all the time those close relationships with parents that they used to have. And that's really very, very important in having that relationship, really to ensure that children get the best education that's available. And so I mentioned some of the reasons, but clearly some of the other reasons have been mentioned too, and that's because parents are working multiple jobs, they have multiple kids that they have to take care of, they don't have access to transportation or other things. So there's really are lots of barriers too. And so one of the things that I would really support is creating some resources in the schools to help do that kind of outreach so that we can identify those things and really identify what kind of events would bring people together so that those parents can be more involved in the school and with the teachers. And I think Santino, what he talked about using Zoom might really help in some of those situations where it's childcare or something like that. But even bringing that childcare to the school for some of these events so that parents can show up and not be worried about what's happening with their kids or who's watching over them. So I think things like that, leveraging the relationship with the Boys and Girls Club to really help build those relationships. So I really do think it's one of the most important things, at least from what I've seen, the drop in the level of parental support and participation in the schools is a big factor.
SASD recently adopted principles of equity that outline organizational attitudes, beliefs, and practices that promote an increased sense of belonging for all students, equitable access to district programming with high expectations and flexible learning environments for all students. As a board member, How do you plan to work to address the opportunity and achievement gaps in SASD? And Santino, you're starting.
Oh, Lord. Addressing achievement gaps, we need to set some benchmarks. We need to get back to the basics. And starting with seeing where our children are, letting them take a pre-test and understanding what they've accumulated thus far, and starting to compound on the information that has been presented and delivered through teaching. I think that's going to be one way to get the achievement gap. We have to understand that our children are very, very resilient. They're able to fight. They're able to give it their all. They're able to, when their back's up against the wall, they know how to fight, and we need to teach them that way. We need to give them the opportunity to fight for their education. We need to give them the opportunity to fight to be a successful person in life, and just trying to teach them to the test won't work. Trying to pacify them through the system just won't work. We have to give them some rigor. We have to give them some hard coursework and push them, because if we just give them something, then they didn't earn it. And to close the achievement gap, we have to trust and believe that they are going to give it their all. We have to trust and believe the educational system will do its work if we provide it to them. That's what we have to do. We have to provide it to them. We can't give up on them. No child left behind. We have to continue to fight for our kids. We need to continue to fight for their education. So that's how we can close the achievement gap. Thank you.
With the achievement gaps, I think we need to look at children as an individual. Everybody learns at different paces, at different speeds. Social aspects of your family, everything can affect your education. And I believe very strongly in learning appropriate groups. I remember as a student myself, if you needed extra help, you were in the back of the classroom. And then there was everybody that was working at kind of the same pace. And then there's the ones that were, really fast in getting things done. So I think helping kids be with other children that are learning at the same speed is where I'm going with this. It just lets them take a deep breath, that they're not challenging, they're not going against somebody, they're not, they can work at their own pace. But definitely looking at them as an individual. Each child's different, so closing those gaps and talking to the teachers. They have a good idea. They're in the classroom with the students every day, listening to them, and, they might have a good plan, with their specific classroom. Every class, every year, it's changing. So I guess listening to everybody and taking that all in and making a good plan.
I'm going to steal a line from Marcos. If I had the answer to that, I would have said that 9 years ago. When you look nationwide, the gaps are there. And there have been a lot of ideas, a lot of suggestions, to help close the education gap, the achievement gap, especially among students of color, and white students. And but it's not impossible. I think one of the things that we can look at is the idea of having more co-teaching in classrooms. We have a number of students who are special needs, as an example. And something that I found, in doing some research and in talking to teachers, is that that can be successful, is the idea of having two teachers in a classroom teaching together. One teacher might be focused on the special needs kids, another one may be, maybe working with the traditional students. But the idea of, then being able to collaborate, sometimes those teachers one teacher may have an idea, it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. What it also does too is it also reduces the pupil-teacher ratio. So those teachers can be able to focus more on those students than they would be if they were in a class, say, of 35 students in a high school setting. They would only have 20 or 17. That is one thing that I think we can really take a look at. Another thing we're going to look at, I'm going to answer this very briefly because I know my time is almost up, is we do need to plus up our summer school. We need to have more summer school teachers. We need to encourage those students that are behind, take the time, go to summer school. We need to have remediation, if at all possible, to help those kids as well.
Always feel like I'm cutting you off. So I think probably this goes back to sort of the ABCs that I had alluded to earlier, is just accountability and communication. Really identifying what resources are needed for those individual students and making sure that we are getting them what they need in order to be successful adults. So they have the education, the confidence, and the empowerment, so when they enter the workforce at 18, they're ready to go in order to start benefiting, returning that favor to society. And as far as identifying the gaps, I'm pretty sure COVID has helped widen those gaps.
Yes.
Due to the fact that, unfortunately, the most diverse school districts were the ones that stayed closed, the more rural ones stayed open through this. And so I believe there was a stats done by the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank that basically forecasted that almost 4%, or high school dropout rates are expected to increase by 4%, shrinking incomes for the next 70 years. So we need to stop this before it starts to get worse. In order to kind of close that gap, before we can start rowing the boat, we got to plug the hole. So first and foremost, we got to get the kids back in school, and then we can start talking about a lot of those achievement gaps that can be addressed through summer school programs, through extra school during the regular school year, because this is going to take this isn't just going to be a one summer deal. This is going to take years to make up, and we owe it to the kids to show them that they are worth fighting for and their education is worth serving.
So I think many of the same things that have been mentioned. I think the first thing that I would do is listen and learn, because I think that really the best information probably does come from the teachers that are fighting through this every day. I think it's important that we, again, remember that these are individuals and they're all different and they have different learning styles and they have different strengths and different weaknesses. And so we have to play to those things. I agree with what Santino said, and that we have to challenge them. We need not to accept that failure is okay and that everybody isn't or doesn't have the ability to achieve if we provide them with the right opportunities and tools to do that. And sometimes that can get hard and tiring and wear down, but we really have to believe that it's possible and that we can do it. And so keeping that right attitude and encouraging them, I think, is part of it. I agree too with what Ryan said about co-teaching. So I know that in the schools now, from my experience as a lunch buddy, watching those that need extra help in certain subjects sometimes get relocated to other classrooms to help out or get special individualized attention. So whatever that really looks like from a teacher in a school standpoint, I would support that, whether it's co-teaching or whether it's providing more resources to provide that individual attention so that somebody can get caught up or at least increase to the level that they are at that point.
What a great question. Thank you. I think it's critically important that as a board, this all the way from the board down to classroom interactions, that the principles of equity get articulated in a really clear way. The district has spent a lot of time and resources implementing data, procedures and tracking infrastructure that we can use to make sure to measure how the plans around principles of equity are taking effect. I think a lot of our way forward can be found in the proven principles of universal design and learning. We need to make sure that school is accessible and to have a system that's flexible to bring education, make education engaging to all the students and families. And then second, I think as a community, we need to engage in an honest conversation about opportunity gaps. Not every student starts at the ELC with the same basis, and that goes all the way through 12th grade. Those differences in opportunity show up in graduation rates. So more broadly speaking, I think as a community, we need to let the school district know that it isn't just on the school district to address. And I look forward to having that conversation in this community. Thank you.
How do you plan to work with other board members who may have differing thoughts or opinions than you?
I like working with people. I've done it my whole career. I do not have a problem in a conversation disagreeing with people. I like to have that conversation, and I like seeing both sides of the fence, and I actually very much enjoy that. Coming to a common ground and having just seeing both sides of it and just having the conversation, coming to an agreement and discussion, and I very much enjoy that. I like helping people. I like everything we've done so far with running for school board and learning more, and I've never stopped learning. I have a career that I consistently have to continue my education, and I like those conversations, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
For people, when we have very passionate conversations, we have to remember that it's not personal. That we may have very different points of view. Some are more conservative, some are more liberal, and we've got to accept that and understand that. The cool thing about being on a school board is that we all have one goal, and that is how best can we help our kids and our community. That's it. We may have different ways of expressing that. We may have different ways of how to go about that. But at the end of the day, if we achieve that goal, then we're a success. As far as personal conflicts on the board, I think you can say in any organization, especially in an organization that is filled with leaders, you will have people who have very strong points of view. Sometimes what it takes is like, hey, now haven't been able to do that a whole lot this year, but it's like, hey, why don't we go for a beer after the meeting? And we won't talk anything school board. We're going to watch the Brewer game. And remember that there is a personal relationship there as well. Just because I may think your idea is wrong doesn't mean that I think you're an idiot. It doesn't mean that I think that you're a bad person. We just disagree. And again, that goes down to the whole idea of listening and trying to understand their point of view. Equity is not just for kids, it's for adults too. We also need to understand where our colleagues are coming from and where they've been, and also too where they want to go. And I think that's a key thing. even though we may sometimes have very heated arguments, I will tell you that the next board meeting, we usually laugh out loud because of the fact that we do try to collaborate and understand where everyone is coming from.
I think before all this debate started, I think we kind of hit it on the head, especially Ryan. Like, we all have the same focus that we want the best for our kids and our community, and we just have different ways of going about it, and whether or not it really depends on our different backgrounds. And I think it's an asset that we have a wide range of diverse people with different backgrounds coming to the board, bringing their different expertise. Whether it's from education or the private industry or private school or public, it just makes the entire board and district stronger to work with. And at least from my personal experience, that about 80% of the work is usually done behind the scenes, and that's what I would really strive to do, to have those conversations with my fellow board members to make sure that everything is getting flushed out, that we are supporting the administration through the policies that they want to enact, and really asking the right questions, and that we always trust but verify the information that's being presented so we can make those decisions, because it is very important for leaders to make a decision. It has been extremely difficult this year, everything from the federal on down, to make those decisions, but decisions need to be made, and that's really what I would rally all the other board members around, is that we need to support and make decisions together as a cohesive unit.
So I think the first thing that I would do is see them as people and not objects, and really listen to understand. So not listen to just hear them, but really to understand where they're at and where they're coming from. I think then I would respectfully challenge to really try to flush things out and see how it meshes with my views or my thoughts. I would then reflect. Something I really like to do a lot, really just sit and think and determine if my view is right, or maybe if I was wrong and what they're saying was right, or is it someplace in the middle. I think then I would research, and that might be by going to other sources or asking them more questions, really to, again, try to flush it out. And then I think really the key is what's already been mentioned, and that is that the board is really there to come to the best decision. And we can only do that by relying on each other to really inform our own views.
So I think it's really important my belief is that the measure of how well a beloved community functions isn't the absence of conflict, but rather what the community does with conflict, how we center each other's dignity, we recognize the human worth, the inherent human worth that we bring, that we are born with, that is inalienable to us. And in conflict, when we have a difference of opinion, it's the onus is on us to escalate the level of our engagement, right? To really lean into that relationship and figure out where those differing opinions come from. I don't have a real problem with differing opinions. In fact, I welcome them, because in justifying my position, my thinking becomes more clear. Sometimes my thinking changes as I consider other people's opinions. So I welcome Mr. Berg's differing opinion on the board all the time. And I think we're better for it. Thank you.
Well, this might sound very redundant. Everybody's giving out great advice, but my motto is children first, community always. If your agenda or your opinion in the board meeting is not about the children being first or about our community, then I'm gonna challenge you. And it's good to have a healthy conversation, a healthy debate, challenge each other. That's what we need to do. We can't get better if we just sit there and accept each other's opinions or accept each other's project that they're bringing up. We have to challenge each other, and there has to be analytical data. I'm not going to say, yeah, I'm going to go with that if you don't have any data to back up your claim. We have to make sure we're doing what's best for our families and our children and our teachers. That's where the data has to come in, and we can make informed decisions. It's not about me. And it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about our children, our teachers, and our community. That's what we have to. That's what we have to be focused on. I'm listening, and I'm going to be that. Listen to the voices that are in the back of the room that's not being heard. Those are the people that need to come to the table. Everybody else, we know that we can hear them. We can empathize with them. We can say, okay, yes, they're saying that. But what about the people that aren't being heard? What about their needs? We have to make sure we're doing best for our special ed program and also our disability programs. We have to make sure that everybody is well-rounded and taken care of, and make sure that the dollars are being spent accordingly to the projects and the plans that we have. And that's what it's about. It's not about us. It's about the children and our community and our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you all. This is our final question. Should the school board determine policies that outline the roles and responsibilities and/or evaluation of school resource officers in Sheboygan Area School District?
Yes. I mean, that to me is a yes or no question, but to expand on that a little bit, I know one of the questions that was brought up in that was brought up as a suggestion from the last DEIB get-together was the role of the police in our district. I support the idea of having SROs in our district. I think they provide a valued resource. Not only in terms of discipline, but with proper training and with guidance, especially when it comes to equity, they can provide a very solid role model and for our students and for our community as a whole. That's important. I think that all SROs, all police officers that are engaged in our school system, they need to go through the exact same training that our teachers do, our staff does, when it comes to diversity, when it comes to bias. I think that'll be helpful. I think they need to be active, in the discussion as well. When we talk about equity, when we talk about site-based teams, they need to be part of the discussion. I think that is something that is incredibly important. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I am the expert here, that I will leave to Chief Domagowski, but I think those are some things that can be done. One, we do need to support our SROs, but we also need to make sure that they have the same training, when it comes to bias. And that if they are looking at making, that they're treating people the same way as they would every other student or every other citizen. So that's something that I strongly believe in.
I would say that I do support the SROs in the school district. I view it as a good asset to the school district, no different kind of our neighborhood police officer program, that in order to kind of bridge that gap, you need to build those relationships, especially between the SROs and the students. And it is really vital to kind of overcoming some of the problems to make sure that the students don't view them as something to be feared, that it could be a resource, that if they're in trouble, that they can feel comfortable calling them up and asking for help. Because a lot of times students don't know where to turn when they do find themselves in difficult situations. And that SRO might be someone that they could reach out to if they don't feel comfortable with their teacher or another family member or any of the other community leaders out there, that this might be their one lifeline in order to get out of a bad situation. So I really think we should leverage it and use it to the best of the abilities.
So I would also say yes, that the school board definitely should be involved in the policies and procedures on the SRO's role in the school. And I would tell you that currently the police department has a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the school district, and has had one for a number of years. That lays out what the SRO's role is in the school. And so I think that's very important. They can't effectively function in the school if they don't know where they fit in and what their role is and what's expected from them. And at the same time, the principals and staff can't function effectively if they don't know and understand what the SRO's role is. And so I think that alignment is very, very important. Occasionally, when developing those policies, there may be disagreements, but it goes right back to the question that's already been asked, and that's that we're not always going to agree on everything. And when those situations develop, then really the key is, as Marco said, that we don't walk away, that we really lean in and educate each other and get to understand what the barrier is there and work our way through that.
So embodying the answer to the previous question, I'm going to disagree with everybody who has just spoken and say, no, I don't believe that SROs belong in our buildings. But that doesn't mean that I have a personal problem with anybody. That doesn't mean that I think Chief Domagowski here isn't due dignity, or that I have a problem with him. But I want to keep it real honest with you all. I'm here because I want to center the voices and lived experiences of people who have been marginalized and underserved for many, many years. And I am one of those people who, when in front of a person in uniform and a weapon, has trouble articulating thoughts, has trouble learning. We have a large community of people who don't have a healthy relationship with the police, who have trouble learning when there is a uniform present. Now, that doesn't mean that I advocate for throwing the SROs or speaking ill of our police department. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, can we apply our considerable intelligence, our ability to lean into conflict and center the students to come up with a better way of reaching the outcomes that we're trying to reach with the presence of the police in our schools. I do believe in a lot of what the Movement for Black Lives has put out on their page, and they are very clear on what police in schools do to students that don't have this healthy relationship with the local police. Thank you.
Well, I have a law enforcement background. My master's and my bachelor's are in criminal justice, but I do believe that SROs should be in the building. Marcos, you make valid points, and I'm sitting here, I wish I didn't have to respond right after that. But I think that we need to address certain issues with officers, and it starts with training. We need to have training with social workers. We need to have training with counselors so that they know how to deal with behaviors inside of the school. I know a lot of individuals say the deterrent of having the uniform and the firearm on their side, then let's figure out a way to have that weapon concealed. Because there's going to be a time, it's not a matter of if, but it's when that individual needs to be in that building and that individual is not there, then what do? Then we put our teachers in a situation to make decisions. I just feel that with the proper training, the proper uniforms, the proper curriculum, teachers go through professional development with different curriculum. We should do that with our SROs inside of the building. And I think it's very, very beneficial so that they understand the same processes that teachers go through in ways to serve our students and our community. So yes, I do support it, and we might need to revamp it. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of communication out there that can help us make a better informed decision, but just to take it out, I'm not sure that's something that needs to be done. Thank you.
Excuse me. Yes, I do support the police and the RSOs being, the SROs being in the schools. I think they are a positive resource. I know, as with COVID, the media, the horrible things that have happened in our world, there's a lot of healing we have to do as a country. And because bad things happen doesn't mean everybody's bad. So I think that goes along with a lot of training. There's going to be healing, and I think they have a positive place in the schools. I don't know that I remember them being in uniform when I was in high school, but they were a place where it was a safe place. I remember friends were in bad situations, and they knew that that was someone they could go, and it was a legal issue, and they could go right to them, and they felt safe talking to them. But like I said, there's a lot of healing, and there's a lot of trust, and the training and education, just like everybody else, it's ongoing. It can keep going, and everybody needs it, and everybody needs to be held accountable for their actions. And like what was said before, you know, some really, really awful things have happened in the schools over the years, and having an officer there, I personally feel safe. I mean, it makes me feel good that there is somebody there if there is something awful to happen, that they are there immediately. And if not, they have a radio to communicate immediately. So, thank you.
Thank you to our candidates and everyone who made this evening a success, especially Scott Mealiff and WSCS, Channel 99 or 990 on your dial. Be sure to vote on Election Day, April 6th, or via early voting. Remember, your vote is your voice. Have a good evening.